Hi guys, I wanted to do a behind the scenes of how I actually prepared my weekly watch list. Okay, so this is gonna be very raw in the sense that I've never prepared for this, right? So the idea here is really to show you what exactly goes behind my weekly routine. Okay, so what I've done is I've cleared all my analysis and drawing for all the charts over here. And this is a typical, 1 to 2 hours time that I spend on my weekend to prepare what are some of the potential setups and opportunities that I'm going to monitor in the market, right? So, and I thought while I'm doing this, it's a good time to also let you guys in, to let you see what exactly I do on the weekend to prepare for the week to come. And because of that, right, I won't be able to, of course, very actively answer your questions when you have it. But at the same time, right, I still encourage you, love for you to actually put those questions in the comments. But what I'll do more is I'll be focusing on going through my entire portfolio, doing the analysis, preparing for the week to come. And I'll illustrate and, of course, speak to you guys a little bit more in terms of the thought process while I'm going through this analysis. Hopefully, it's going to benefit you guys in your journey, whether you are doing trading more in terms of technical analysis or sort. But the idea is really to give you a glimpse into what I do on a week-to-week routine. All right. So without further ado, I'll get started immediately. Okay. So I won't be actively monitoring on the chat, but of course, if you're here, feel free to join in. And if you have any questions, of course, put it in the comments. I won't be able to answer you maybe in this live session, but I'll definitely take a look and will answer you accordingly as well. Right, so we'll get started, right? So I always start my week analysis with the DXY, the dollar index, because I want to understand overall what is the performance of the dollar, right? And that would drive most of the financial instruments in the financial market. And usually if I'm preparing for the week, right, I'm not actively looking for entry yet. I'm more of determining which direction I want to focus, whether is it going to be a buy, a sell, or whether is it going to be neutral, which means that I would likely not focus on the pair if it's neutral. Okay, and my analysis over here, the methodologies that I adopt is really based on Elliott wave principles. Okay, so but what I've done is instead of all the counting, I've actually made it simplified and of course applicable. Okay, so my thought process on here is that last week we saw the dollar weaken quite significantly. Right, this push down is pretty strong. We have right now at this very moment broken below this key level around the 94.6, which means that moving forward next week is actually a very interesting level to watch for the dollar. Because the idea here is that while it's broken does not mean that it will need to continue lower. Okay, because what I'm seeing over here is there's this opportunity or potential, the probability that this can rebound strongly, and from there it can still go higher. Okay, so for me, over here, what I do on a week to week, of course, if I have a watch list like that, which I share with our community, right? And what I do is, you can see on this right here, I usually put few key levels, okay, and the target and the direction I want to focus on. And of course, I always save my chart. Okay, so over here, you can see the termination point. The key level here is about 94.62. Right now, it has reached that. Okay, right now, I would say I wouldn't be too actively looking for short. Instead, I'll be very keen to see if there's any potential bullish opportunity back up towards 97.8. Okay, so that's my target. And of course, right now at this moment, I'm slightly bullish on it. Okay, so usually that's how I do it. Okay, and what I do is I will just put an arrow up and I'll do a screenshot. Okay, I'll put a screenshot of my chart and I'll just put there here. Okay, so what happens is that you can see this is last week, right? So all the charts I have so that I can do a journal, I can do a revision, and of course can tweak and improve on that. Okay, so that's the typical process, right? So what I'll do is I'll repeat this for the entire portfolio, right? And I'll be doing it right now, sharing with you guys as well. Okay, so again, this is the euro dollar chart, is quite inversely proportional and related to the dollar index. You can see that this breakup is pretty strong. Okay, and of course, going back, there isn't much of a significant level other than this high here, okay, which is quite a distance. This is what I'm seeing. So on the euro dollar, I'm actually slightly more bullish. Okay, but at this moment here, this move up looks like a crawl formation to me, which is telling me there's a short-term reversal first or a correction that looks something like this. Then the buy side might be ready. Okay, so for now, I would say this is more or less neutral. Okay, so you can see over here, if it's neutral, I wouldn't want to pay too much attention to it, but I'll typically still take a screenshot of this chart. Okay, and that's about it. Right, so it has broken that key level, but you know, nothing much. So that's how it goes. Next pair. Okay, pound dollar. This is interesting. Okay, because you can see over here, we are at that key termination point, very, very close. And of course, the development towards it is pretty much like a crawl, which means that it's looking like a potential reversal trade. Okay, and if I go to the higher time frame, okay, of course, this can still do a mini double top for a potential reversal down towards this level or even this level. Okay, so from a week-to-week perspective, I'll be interested to look at this target all the way down. Right, so how am I going to do it is I'm going to just take an arrow. Okay, and of course, if I like to, I can put in some trendline drawing, okay, to kind of illustrate what are the patterns that I'm monitoring, something like this. All right, so back to the spreadsheet. My termination point is at 2814. Okay, and the target is 2249. All right, and the direction is bearish. And of course, I'll do a screenshot of this chart as well. Right, and that's how it goes. And usually if I have a clear direction that I'm focusing on, right, on trading view, what I'll do is just give it a tag so that that forms, you know, I know, okay, this pair here, there's a clear direction. I might want to focus on that. Okay, so the whole process repeats, right? So now let's take a look at Australia dollar. Okay, on the daily time frame, there are a few key termination points. We can see this high here has been broken, okay, pretty significantly. But there are still few key highs here, and we are really near this few high points. Okay, and for that reason, I might not be very interested to buy right now. Okay, but you can see how we have broken above this short-term high. Okay, now this drop here, relatively, it can still be very strong. In other words, we might see maybe a correction here and it can still come back down. Okay, so for that reason, I would say I'm more or less neutral right now. Same thing like the euro dollar, right? I'm not too keen into really hopping onto this chart and this trade for next week to come. Okay, and of course, looking at this, you can see how this has been broken up as well. If I were to force a trend line, it looks something like this, but you know, that's not the purpose of putting that line in. Okay, so if things are not clear like this, right? There's no, you know, within that split second, if things don't jump up to me, it means that it's not a very good setup, right? The quality of the setup, the direction bias might not be very high, and usually for that reason, you know, what I'll do is I'll just put it as neutral. Okay. Again, I'm not worried about opportunities because they are always available in the market. I don't have to force a trade in. Okay. So nothing much on the Aussie dollar. Okay. If nothing much is on Aussie dollar, most of the time, the same conclusion can be actually made on New Zealand. This is the daily termination high. We're pretty close to it. Okay, you can see we're pretty close to it. Therefore, I wouldn't be too interested to buy, even though this termination point, you can see, has broken out of it. It looks like it's correcting now. It can do another short-term push to the upside. but I'm not interested in the buy direction because we're so near there. Okay, the room to the upside is pretty capped and limited. If I were to put in some structure line, okay, this is how it's gonna probably look like. Okay, which definitely there's a possibility that this can continue one more to the upside towards 6757. That's where my termination level is going to be, right? And this is where my target is going to be. So what I'm seeing is that I'm more interested in the downside. That room to the downside is much more attractive than the buy. Okay, so for that reason, I'll be more interested to the sell, right? So in this case, my termination is at 6757. Okay, the target I'll be aiming for is around 6358. All right, just to double check, 6385. Okay, and the direction would be to look for sell, right? So I'm having a bearish bias on this. Okay, so same thing, I'll put the chart in, and on trading view, I give it a tag. Right, and I'll just repeat this process in another pair, right? So this is on the dollar Canadian. Okay, so this is the short term here termination level. We are pretty near it. Again, it means that I'm not so keen in selling it. I'll be more interested when price tag this termination area here around 1.3315. How is it developing, right? What pattern, what structure is it developing? As of now, okay, I would say that I'll be more interested on the buy side. Okay, so I'll be keen to see how price comes down towards, okay, the 3315 area. So this one here, I would put in the key level 1.3315. Okay, and my target will be at the top at 3714. Okay, and I'll be having a bullish bias on this. Same thing, I'll take a screenshot. Okay, and I'll put it there. Next pair is the dollar Swiss franc. Okay, so again, this is very closely correlated to the US dollar index, right? So this is where the termination low is, termination point of that low. We are pretty close, but this drop here looks very strong and impulsively. In other words, that it's not time to buy, but I want to pay very close attention to this because we are near it. Easily next week, you can do a V-shaped formation like that, and we do have then a good trade to the upside, right? So very similar to the dollar index. Again, right now is not telling me that I'm going to buy it, but because we are very close to this termination point here, okay, I'll be more interested to monitor for any upside potential. Okay, so for that reason, I'll put this in my watch list simply because we are at the key level here that I want to pay attention to. Okay, so that is around 9181. And I would say based on this right now, the target I would look out for is at least, right, the short term, somewhere around this high, okay, at least there. I wouldn't be too ambitious at this very moment. It's around 9468. Okay, and this would be bullish. Okay, so same thing. I'll take a screenshot of this analysis and I'll put it there. Okay, so over here, okay, once I've done the major pairs, right? These are all the major pairs which has dollar inside it. I will roughly see if there's any form of kind of like alignment between the direction, right? So you can see over here, dollar is bullish. Okay, so if the dollar is strengthening, then likely, you know, like euro dollar, pound dollar, Aussie dollar, New Zealand dollar, you'll be looking for sell. And of course, the dollar CAD, dollar franc, you'll be looking for buy. Okay, and in this case, you can see the direction. Of course, we don't look at the neutral, right? But the others are pretty aligned. Okay, so usually the weekly notes, I'll just put like, you know, just give some comments and notes. I'll put it like the US dollar looking for potential buy side, right? Or I would say like potential buy opportunity. Okay, so that is like, I would say indicating, right? Something like this, right? So then I'll add on to it as we go down, right? So that's how it works, right? How I prepare myself on some of the top process that goes behind it, right? So just to show you like what we did last week over here, you can see that I would say that The dollar index is showing potential upside. Then we look at global equities as well, and then we look at some intercorrelation market, okay, which I'll do every week. So again, in this here, behind the scenes, I'm doing that and showing you guys as well. Okay, so same process, I'll repeat again, right? Going over to the dollar yen, right? So you can see the dollar yen, if I go to the daily, okay, this is the termination point. You can see around 105.96. We have broken it, but almost instantly reversed to the upside, right? This is what I usually call a V-shaped formation. Okay, if next week it continues up like that and forms a setup to go long, then the upside will be very, very attractive. Okay, so definitely on this, what I'm looking at right now is definitely on the bullish side. I would say potential target, I would use that as reference. That's how I'm looking at it. Okay, just to ensure that this point here is in the screenshot, right? So I'll do this scale. So again, termination point around 105.98. Okay, 105.98. We have touched that. Target is 108.17. Right, and this is going to be a bullish bias. Okay, which again falls nicely with the dollar, right? So dollar index is bullish, the dollar yen is bullish, right? So let's continue, right? So this one, I'll give it a tag, right? Dollar cat, I'll give it a tag as well. Good. Okay, so next pair is euro yen. Okay, so euro yen, this is the termination point we're monitoring last week. Okay, very, very close. So right now it seems like there's a small mini impulse to the downside, but almost instantly reverse. I would still be looking for potential sell. Okay, again, this can happen. This can develop into a case where this just forms something like this. Okay, and we still have a crawl formation for the drop to come. Okay, so I'll be still interested to look up for the sell side. Definitely the downside opportunity, the room for it to drop is much higher than the upside. Okay, so for that, the termination point level to monitor is 124.42. Okay, with the target, it will be here, 119.27. Okay, I'll be looking for bearish, and same thing, I'll tag this, take a screenshot. Okay, so you realize that now there are pretty much quite a lot of pairs to monitor, right? But again, on the week-to-week routine, I'll then filter and streamline once I've done all the analysis. Okay, so let's go to the next one. This is on the pound yen. Okay, so how I'm looking at this is that this move up here is pretty corrective, okay, which means that the possibility is due to the downside. Okay, right now this haven't really come all the way to this top, but let's take a look at some of the termination point right here. You can see it has broken that termination point. The next point here is here. Okay, it has also broken it, which means it doesn't need to necessarily come all the way to the top of this channel. Okay, it can be completed like that, and the move down might begin. Okay, and my target will be there. In this case, then I'll be looking for a short. Of course, here it can form a mini double top or even a head and shoulder, right? So for those of you who are quick in technical analysis, this can form a head and shoulder, inverse head and shoulder, head and shoulder, okay, for the drop to the downside. So in this case here is termination point at 136.38. Right, 136.38, which the target is 131.78. Okay, and this is gonna be bearish. Okay, same thing, I'll give it a tag, take a screenshot on this. Right, and good, move on to the next one. Right, Australia yen looking very, very nice as well. You can see this is where it forms that double top. Just tag it and go down impulsively. That's what I like to see. Okay, in terms of structure trend line, it looks something like this. Right now, we do see some form of reaction here, but doesn't mean it's a buy, right? To me, I'm still looking for short, for downside. Okay, and of course over here, if it starts to form any form of correction, or even if it starts to do a double top here and drops, I'll be more interested in the downside. Okay, so let me put that arrow down. So my termination point has been tagged 7679. All right, the target is 7251. This is definitely bearish. Okay, and let me take that screenshot. Cool. Okay, so repeat the same process to the next pair. Let me tag that. Okay, Aussie yen will be a very good pair to watch next week. Okay, New Zealand yen, pretty much similar pattern, right? How it's forming. This one here, you can see almost perfect double top. Okay, if I put in the structure, it looks like that. It has broken that as well. Okay, which is cool, which is nice. What we want, okay, is a consolidation pattern to form here that tell us there's a high probability this will continue to the downside, right? So the target here is going to be here. Okay, so this is a very clean setup to monitor next week as well, right? Definitely the bias is to the downside. So termination is 7164. Okay, and the target 6818. Okay, and this is definitely bearish. Okay, and I'll just put this tag in. Oops, right? Tag in and take a screenshot. Okay, next pair, we're completing the yen family, right? This is on Canadian yen. Okay, let's take a look at Canadian yen. The trading view is loading. Cool. For those of you who joined us slightly late, right? This is basically a behind the scenes of what I do on a week-to-week basis to prepare my watch list. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, of course, feel free to put it in the comment section. But I'll be more focused on doing my analysis, right? Right now, my chart is it's not loading. Okay. It might be the internet connectivity problem. Let me try and refresh my trading view chart. Okay, I think it's working out fine now. We are on CAD yen. Good. Okay, so this is the analysis on CAD yen, right? So on the big picture scheme of things, right? This is impulse and this whole thing is corrective. We are looking for more downside. This pair here was very nice setup last week. You can see over here again, this was our termination point. It broke it and almost instantly it dropped. So that's nice, right? We are expecting more downside for it next week. Okay, but right now it's really in the middle. Okay, which means that if my short-term target is here, I need to assess whether the risk to reward ratio is worth it. Okay, if I'm looking at a longer term perspective, this has the possibility of coming down further. Okay, if this level here breaks. Right, so of course, at least for now, this is how it looks like. So I'll just stick to, oops. Okay, I'll just stick to this, right? Let me just draw in some structure lines to give you clarity of what the pattern is. Okay, this is how it looks like. So I'll be still looking for downside for the week to come, right? The minimum target is here. It can come down, of course, all the way towards that low. So I'll put this here. The termination point would be 7968. Okay, with a target, of course, I'll just put all the way down there, right? Around 7477. Okay, so again, these are not immediate trades that I'm gonna take tomorrow. Okay, this is building my weekly watch list, telling me what are the pairs that I want to pay more attention to throughout the week next week. Which are the pairs that I'll just put it aside and not pay too much attention to them. Okay. After I've done this whole analysis of all the currency pairs in my portfolio, I'll do a filtering process. Okay, so this is on Swiss yen. Okay, so the key part here on the daily you can see is that it has broken this significant termination point pretty impulsively. Okay, on the 4 hour, it came down almost as strong, but it went back up almost as strong. Okay, so likely what is going to develop is this might develop into a big corrective pattern that looks something like that. Okay, so for that reason, I'm going to stick to neutral. Okay, I'm not going to be having, you know, much bias as of now. There's no clarity in it. So that's how it's going to be. This is on neutral. Okay, so again, if you look at the yen families, right, other than the dollar yen, the rest of it are bearish, which means that the yen is looking to be strengthening. Okay, other than the dollar yen. Okay, but doesn't mean that you know, dollar yen won't work out, or sort of things like that, because when you're looking at currencies, again, they have two currencies in play, right? So the yen can be strengthening, but if the dollar strengthen relatively more than the yen, dollar yen as a pair can still move to the upside. Okay, so while I'm doing all this analysis, right, I don't want to be affected by other pairs. So I'm always, you look at it, I'm always analyzing each pair independently, right? And once I've done the entire analysis over here, then only I look at how the relationship of the different currencies come into play. Okay, so good. Let's continue to the next one, which is Euro Pound. Okay, so this is the view on Euro Pound. Let me take a look at the bigger time frame. The bias is due to the downside, right? This is impulsive. This looks pretty much like a very corrective nature of the market. We're looking for more downside. Okay, so on the higher time frame, it's selling more downside. So again, you know, a very quick one on my thought process as to why I go to the higher time frame, because when I see a lot of all this overlapping moves that's happening within the 4 hour or whatever time frame I'm looking at, it's suggesting that this whole piece here is basically a correction. Okay, and I would like to go on a higher time frame to see what's happening. So my key level is here, right? Of course, I would ideally like to see a crawl pattern formation like that for downside opportunity. Okay, so if I were to go to the daily, if I'm going to short it, right, the minimum target I'm looking out for, it's somewhere around here. Okay, so yeah, that's that level, right? If I were to use the daily chart and put in some lines, that's how it looks like. Okay, as of now, it looks something like this, right? Not the nicest drawing or structure, I would say. Okay, so this is where I'm playing around with 4 hour and daily when the 4 hour itself is not giving me sufficient information. Okay, but nonetheless, I'll be looking for sell bias, right? 9175 is my termination point, and the target will be at 8862. Okay, this is gonna be bearish. Let me take a screenshot of that. Good. Okay, next pair is on Euro Australia. Okay, again, let me take a look at the daily. Yeah, it's really not that clear. Why? Because you can see these are where the price has been tagging quite a lot. We are quite near that bottom. Okay, so if I were to make it here, let's take a look at the 4 hour, right? The 4 hour right now, this looks like forming a bigger corrective pattern, and then from there it can still come back down, right? If I were to pick a side, I would say I'm still more interested in the downside. Okay, but at this moment here, of course, the high probability is for price to eventually tag this here, right? The idea is how it's gonna come up. Is it gonna break out impulsively, or is it gonna slow down while it's reaching this high? Okay, so for me, I would, at this very moment, I'll be more keen to look for a trade that looks something like this. Okay, wait for it to tag this termination point, and I would like to see how it reached there. So my termination point will be at the 6585, and the target will be at that lower around 6031. Okay, and this is gonna be a bearish bias as of now. Okay, let me put that tag in. Take a screenshot of that. Cool. Okay, and let's move on to the next, which is Euro Kiwi, right? Which is pretty similar to Euro Australia, right? These two pairs are very, very closely correlated. We are definitely in a range environment, but doesn't mean that we can't trade, okay? Because the idea here is if the risk reward is still worth it, you know, by all means, you can still trade the top of the range to the bottom of the range and etc. Okay, so this again is a bearish bias. Okay, so my termination point is 7649. The target would be at that low of the range, 7189. Okay, this would be bearish, and this is screenshot. Good. Okay, next one is on Euro Canadian. Wow, this looks very corrective. Okay, look how corrective it is. It's just not a clean chart to look at right now. You can see how corrective it comes down, how corrective it went up. Okay, yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised that if price just keep coming up all the way back up. Okay, so for that reason, I would say, you know, the opportunities are abundant in the market. There's no need for me to, you know, squeeze something out of this. Yeah, so I would just put it as, you know, I'll just go to daily and just really put this as neutral. Okay, there's nothing much to really focus on this right now. Okay, let's move on to the next, which is Pound Australia. Okay, on the daily, this looks pretty nice. It looks like a crawl formation now. Okay, 4 hour, we did get that spike to the upside. That's good. Okay, and we are near the top of that. That looks great as well, right? So this is how it's looking right now. Cool. Now, if this were to go, okay, let me see if I can find any perspective on the daily, right? Okay, so this is really the low. We are not there. Doesn't mean it always needs to go there. Okay, so in this case, I would say my target for the 4 hour, if I'm looking to buy, it would be using this reference point. Yeah, right. So this is how it looks like. I'll be bullish bias on this. Okay, to put into perspective, I would take this as my termination point instead, right? Maybe a potential double bottom first, right? It doesn't need to form that, but I'll monitor, right? This is definitely a key pair to watch next week, Pound Australia. Okay, termination point 7695. Target would be at 8452. This is going to be a bullish setup. Okay. Good. Now let's take a look at Pound New Zealand. All right. Pretty similar pattern that it's looking out like. It's already going sideways. Okay, but there's a slight variation in terms of how this pattern is forming versus the Pound Australia, right? And if I were to pick, I would say, you know, I wouldn't be very keen in buying this. You know, we are really in a range environment, right? So if I look at this, we are really in a range environment. So this can still potentially come down. Okay, you can look at this, right? How it has respected this termination point. Yeah, so if I were to pick a side, I would say this one here, I would likely look for sell opportunity instead of buy, right? So this is like slightly against the Pound Australia, right? Because Pound Australia, we're looking for buy. Pound New Zealand, we are actually bearish. Okay, so again, that's why I say I look at pairs when I do my analysis, right? I look at them at the start independently, right? Because I wouldn't want to cloud my analysis and let other pairs affect, you know, the current pair when I'm doing this analysis. So I always do it independently. But at the same time, you know, when I finish the analysis later, I'll walk you through again. I'll do look at my entire portfolio and see if there's any kind of alignment or conflicting direction in that relationship. Okay, so in this case, the termination point is 929. All right, and the target is 9018. All right, I'll put this as a tag as well, and let's take a look at the pound CAD. Right, daily, it looks like it can still drop. Okay, this here is the mini impulse, and this looks very corrective in nature. Let's take a look at 4-hour. Okay, the 4-hour is also very corrective in nature. Okay, as a reference, okay, this is where the termination point is. Again, we are at that key zone. Okay, and this is where the short-term target will be, right? So great opportunities to really focus on. There are many next week. Okay, so again, sometimes market give us a lot of opportunities for the week. Sometimes it's just quiet, right? So we don't need to force any trade. I'm gonna take a bearish bias on this termination point at 7177. The target will be at 6748, right? This is gonna go in as a bearish bias. Cool, right? So we're done with the cross pair. Let's go on to some of the commodities currency, right? Did I tag that? Yeah, let me tag that first. Cool, right? Australia, New Zealand. Okay, this is how it's looking. Last week we were seeing this, right? We're looking for upside. It reached this level here, almost a perfect double top. That's the response from the market, right? So right now there's an opportunity, or I would say the possibility right now is that it might, continue falling towards 105.67. Let's take a look at daily. Okay, it's likely going to form a bigger corrective pattern here. Yeah, so I would say that that's likely here the bias on the direction is to the downside, right? Okay, so potentially another mini double top first. In either case, if I were to pick a direction, it's going to be down. Okay, this here, the termination point is 0755 with a target of 0564. Okay, and this is going to go in as a bearish bias. Okay, good. All right, so let's take a look at the next Aussie CAD. This is looking good. Okay, look at this, right? This is a crawl formation on the daily, suggesting that it's a reversal pattern. Okay, it's losing momentum to the upside. And if I were to put the target, it'll be here. Okay, so definitely it's a downside bias on this, right? No doubt about it. Okay, so if I were to put a termination point at the top, right? We can't rule out the possibility that this can still form a double top. It doesn't need to do that. But for scenario planning purposes, that's what I usually do. I plan out various scenario. Okay, so it can form a correction here and drop. It can also form a double top, and from there it drops. Okay, so for that reason, I'm going to just put it there first. Okay, so this is definitely going in as a bearish bias on Aussie CAD. Termination point is at 9641. The target I'm looking at is 927. Okay, bearish bias. Let's take a look at New Zealand CAD. All right, let me tag that as well. Okay, very, very similar to the Aussie CAD. You can take a look at the daily, right? It's really losing its momentum to the upside. We are seeing price starts to crawl. This is again a crawl pattern, right? If I just put that in, it looks something like that. Okay, this is more like an expanding crawl, right? Expanding diagonal. If I were to look for sell, I would say the downside is not that clear in terms of the opportunity, but I'll just put it there on a daily perspective. Okay, I would say that there's a high chance price will give some reaction from this termination point, which means that it can drop, and then from here it can start to bounce, right? So again, this is not whether I'm going to take a trade. Is more like this weekend analysis is really to show me if the bias of a direction is clear. Okay, so in this case here, the direction bias is pretty clear cut. I'm looking for sell, right? The key is whether I'm going to take that trade next week is a total different story. Okay, but I know that the direction I would rather like to focus is to the downside. Okay, and again, if I were to put a termination point at the top, okay, that would be that potential double top, right? So bias on the New Zealand CAD is gonna be, okay, let me type that in first. 898 is my termination. Target would be at 871. Okay, and this is gonna go in as a bearish bias. Cool, right? So good. We are almost done. Okay, let me tag this pair. Next is gold. Okay, which I think this is where it gets interesting, right? Many of you are looking at gold. It broke above the 18,000. Now it's breaking above the 19,000. Okay, but those of you who have been following me sometime, you know that between gold and silver, I rather choose silver because you look at this, right? On a weekly time frame, this is like the previous peak. We are there. We are there. Okay, so for that reason, I'll be very cautious in buying it. Of course, if you have bought it somewhere lower, then you know you're running in good profits. Just manage it accordingly. But if you're not there, you haven't entered any position, and you were thinking, should you jump in now? Because of maybe the fear of missing out, right? The answer is of course no, because the upside looks, it might be capped. There might be some reaction, okay, and it's either going to reverse or it can form a correction. In other words, the timing to buy is not now. Okay, if you're not in yet. Okay, if you're not in yet. Yeah, so for that reason, right, I wouldn't be very aggressively looking for buy. If you ask me, I will be rather bearish on this. Okay, in terms of short term, right, it's bearish because we're already near that termination high. Okay, I'll be looking more like either a short term correction or a reversal from there. Okay, so for that reason, I'm just gonna put that termination in at 1922. Okay, and of course this is 1794, right? I'm not gonna trade this to the downside, but again, you know, this is just my weekly routine of planning out the direction. Okay, so don't take it as I'm selling gold. No, I'm not. I'm definitely not gonna sell gold. Okay, but again, if you're not in the buy, it's not a good time to buy right now. Okay, at where price is at this very moment. Okay, so while my bias is bearish, right? I'm not selling. Okay, again, what I'm doing here is not to take a trade immediately next week, but it's really establishing my bias, right? Looking out what are the things that I want to focus on next week. Okay, silver. Okay, I'm in on silver long. You can see how price broke this. Perfect. Okay, this high has been broken impulsively, which suggests that the momentum is definitely to the upside, right? Again, why silver? Look at this. This is the previous high. That room to the upside is just huge. Okay. Yeah, so my bias on silver is definitely bullish, no doubt about it. Okay. Let me look for at least a short-term target. Okay. I would say maybe somewhere around this area. Let me clear that off. All right. So yeah, so this is okay on the 4-hour chart, right? Back to the 4-hour chart. I would just say to be neutral. I would really put that. Okay. Again, if you're not in, it's not a good time to buy right now. We have moved off pretty impulsively. You need to wait for a correction, some form of consolidation before you enter that trade. Okay, so if you're not in, don't hop onto it too aggressively. Yeah, I would just really put this as neutral, right? Okay, WTI, OI. Okay, this looks very corrective in nature. Okay, if we were to put that in, it's a diagonal, it's a crawl. Okay, in other words, don't go and buy it. Okay, it's not a good time to buy it now. Hey, look at this, it's really losing its momentum. You will be more interested in that short-term retracement. Of course, if this trade doesn't excite you, then you know it means the risk reward is really not worth it. Okay, but I'm looking at this. Right, so quick one, 42.08 is my termination point. My target would be at 35.84. Okay, this is gonna go in as a bearish bias. Good. All right, so we're done with the commodities. Let's get on with the Swiss francs. Right, this looks clean. There are a few possibilities of this playing out. Right now, this looks like E flat, which is a corrective pattern, right? Which means more upside potential. Looks very, very clean in here. You have an impulse, you have a correction, you expect one more push to the upside. Okay. So, but of course, we can't rule out the possibility that this forms a double top and then from there it can drop, right? Because then this forms that impulse, this forms that bigger corrective pattern for the drop to come. Okay, so, you know, that is really 50-50 right now. Okay, I'll put this as neutral, right? I'll really put this as neutral. Okay, but it's still interesting to watch next week, okay, because of the pattern here is really very nice. But the scenario, the different scenarios and the possibility of it is really, there's no edge, right? It's really, there are too many possibilities that this can happen. Yeah, so for that reason, right? So you see sometimes things looks very nice, but it might not be the highest quality one, right? So again, I wouldn't want to force anything in. Yeah, I'll just put that as neutral. Let's take a look at the next Swiss franc, which is pound, right? This is clean. Okay, this is clean. You can see that this is really forming that flag pattern, right? Which is a correction. Okay, which is a correction. We have broke below it. We are probably consolidating over there. Let's take a look at the daily, right? There's still potential that it can drop. Short-term target, I would say it's at this termination low. Okay. Yeah, so this looks clean, all right? Between this and the Euro franc, I would say this is much cleaner. But of course, you need to assess again whether the risk reward is worth it. If you take a trade here, is that risk reward worth taking that trade, right? The other scenario is, of course, this forms a double top and then it comes down. Okay, so for that reason, I'll just put it there with the termination point at the top. So this would be 1937. Okay, the target is 1630. All right, so this is gonna go in as a bearish view. Good. Okay, gonna test. Move on. Aussie Swiss franc. We were monitoring this, right? You can see how nice the pattern was last week. Okay, we get that first drop reaction. Okay, so very high chance we are gonna see some form of continuation pattern for it to continue downside. Okay, towards this here. Okay, so this is definitely down, right? This is definitely down. I'm gonna just put that as a reference for termination point. It's definitely gonna go be a bearish bias on this, no doubt. Okay, this is 6684. Target is gonna end up at 6424. All right, bearish bias. Let's move on. Let's tag this New Zealand franc. Okay, we are almost done with the entire portfolio. This is again bearish bias, no doubt about that. Okay, very, very clean structure forming. The target short term at least around this area, 6040. Okay, I'll just put that termination point there. Bias is definitely to the downside. Okay, it can of course go lower than that, right? But I would say the minimum target to put right now is about 6040, right? Termination point 6226, right? 6040, bearish. Good. It seems like the Swiss franc category and family, they are all bearish as well. Okay, which means that likely the stock market has been dropping, pulling in this risk currency down. Okay, cat franc. Oh, this is really jumped. Okay, let's take a look at the 4-hour. Right, this is like, yeah, it's going down pretty strong and impulsively, but again, there are few scenarios this can play out really. Okay, this can be more like, you know, a diagonal that eventually this can pops. Okay, it can also be this is that running flat like that, and this is ready to go. Okay, so again, not all setups are clear and you need to force something in, don't need. Okay, the overall bias is definitely down. The question is, do these come out first then go down, or from here it can start to drop? Okay, and I really don't like this kind of where that, you know, there's so many possibility and scenario, I'll always put this kind as neutral. Okay, because this can just be completed correction and it's really dropped. I'll just put it as neutral, really. Okay, there's no need to force this in. We do have a lot of opportunities already from where we are right now. Okay, so I'm just putting this down, neutral. Okay, let's go to the index. S&P, no doubt. Sure, I'm having a bearish bias as of now. Take a look at this. Okay, last week we were looking at that already, but you know, it was a bit slower. It went up slightly higher first before that drop, right? You can see here. Right now, that's how it looks like. Of course, this is the smaller scale, I would say, the more conservative target. You know why I say that? Okay, because this is how the patterns look like actually. Okay, something like that, right? So this becomes that short-term target. Yeah, right. So if I were to do a screenshot, I would say maybe I'll just put 2 lines here. Yeah, I can take those out, right? Those of you who are familiar with our principles of trading, you know what this is, okay? And those trend lines are really just for visual perspective. So I'm definitely bearish on this. The idea here is it going to drop to here and bounce, or is it going to drop all the way down? Okay, so that's the only thing that you might really want to consider and take note of. Okay, so nonetheless, I'm definitely bearish on this. Okay, so if I'm going to put this termination is 3232. The target I'll be more conservative. I'll put the first one here, right? I'll put the first one here is 3129. Okay, and this is going in as bearish. Okay, the DAX is also bearish. Okay, let me also tag that. I forgot to tag it. Okay, the DAX is definitely bearish, right? We're looking at DAX last week as well. Okay, for those of you who are not familiar, you can follow me on TradingView. Okay, so every week I post an idea, you know, to just share with you a little bit what are some opportunities, right? So this is like last week idea, right? We were looking for short. Of course, it didn't immediately drop. Okay, that's not the idea of it, but it's the direction that I'm sharing, right? Okay, just to show you how this play out. Of course, this was done on Sunday. Okay, we're gonna publish one idea today as well. Okay, for the week, right? So I do one idea per week. So what happens is, of course, it went slightly higher and then it starts to come down impulsively, right? The idea is because we are so near this termination point, right? Back last week, you wouldn't want to be focusing on buy because we are already so near at the top, right? Opportunity might not be very attractive. And exactly these are the things that you do not want to trap yourself in, because if you buy here, okay, you might have that short-term profit, but you know, when a drop comes fast, you might end up from a profitable trade becoming a losing trade, okay? And that psychology is really difficult to handle. Okay, so as of now, you know, the bias is still definitely to the downside. Okay, this is how it looks like. Okay, if I were to put that line of structure in, you know, this is how it looks like. Okay, it's something like this, right? It's really for visual perspective, but this pattern here is really telling us downside. Okay, it's downside. So the bias is definitely the downside. Any opportunity to look for sell, unless proven otherwise, you'll be looking for this sell. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Termination point 12939. Targets would be at 11938. Oops, 11938. This is gonna be bearish. Okay, we're almost done. Last one on Hang Seng, and we're done analyzing everything for the week. Cool. Okay, so Hang Seng looks okay. The daily is telling me more downside. Okay, again, why? This is impulse, right? This looks like a flag formation, 1, 2, 3 wave. In Elliott wave, that's your ABC pattern formation, and usually that happens. It drops, but it can form a more complex one. It can keep going, potentially forming a double top, right? So there are a few possibilities that how this can eventually develop and play out. On the 4-hour though, okay, this drop doesn't look very strong, which means that there's a possibility this can pop back up first somewhere around here. Yeah, again, I would stick something, you know, if I see something like this, I'll stick to more like neutral, but you know, if I put this in, we're pretty close there. So for those of you who are trading Hang Seng, okay, I don't trade Hang Seng. Okay, I don't trade the index. I'm really analyzing it for my entire portfolio to understand where are the equities market going. If you are trading Hang Seng, then this might continue to crawl, and you do have, when that happened, right, you do have a very nice setup over here that looks something like this. Okay, and there might be a short-term upside. Okay, so yeah, if you ask me to pick, short-term is 3 upside. Right now, I would say it's neutral for me in terms of this index. Okay, okay, good, neutral. All right. Okay, so we are done. Okay, so this is how I do it. Okay, of course, the time that we took, let me just do a quick time check. I think we started around 9, now it's about 10. Okay, so I took about 1 hour to do this, right? Of course, a bit slow because I'm actually vocalizing my thoughts. Okay, and then of course explaining a little bit to you guys. Yeah, but more or less it's around there, about maybe 45 minutes to an hour. That's how much time I need to go through this entire list. Okay, again, is it very time consuming? Really, no. Okay, and what I've done is I've really come up with all the direction buys. Okay, and the next step over here is I want to find out what pairs that I want to focus on, because if you look at here, right, there's just too many. Okay, my attention will be spread out if I were going to look at it every one of this. Okay, so what I like to look out for is number one, I look at the index, right? The index is bearish. Okay, so if I just, let me just do this, right? I'll just copy from last week and then we edit it. Okay, so look at this, right? Dollar index is still showing upside potential, right? Over here is upside potential. Global equities are suggesting downside, right? Putting us in a potential risk off environment. You can look at this equities market, they are bearish. Okay, so that still stands for this week. Let's take a look at euro pound, right? So you look at this here, euro pound, I'm bearish. Okay, so same thing, right? So this suggests that euro will be likely weaker compared to the pound, right? And Aussie Kiwi, okay, take a look here. Aussie Kiwi is bearish, so this bias here has changed slightly for this week. Let me update that. Okay, so suggesting that Australia would be relatively weaker from New Zealand, right? And hence our focus will be on buying dollar, yen, and shorting Aussie and New Zealand, right? So this one here is really on the understanding of risk. Okay, I would say if we were to short it, right, because this one here suggests that Australia might be slightly more weaker than New Zealand. So if there's a duplication of it, I would rather choose to sell Australia than to sell New Zealand. Okay, so that gives a backstory, some form of framework for me to choose how to filter certain pairs. Okay, so looking at this, let's take a look at euro pound screenshot that I've just done. Cool, which means yeah, short-term upside, long-term down. Okay, so it's still overall bearish on that. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so over here, New Zealand and okay, so this one here, Australia is neutral, right? So New Zealand is in. Okay, so I might not want to focus too much on New Zealand dollar for that reason, because Australia might be better one. So let me put that in. I would take a look at dollar CAD for sure. Okay. Euro yen. Okay, that's gonna go in definitely. Or between Australia yen and New Zealand yen, I'll take Australia yen because of that reason. All right. Yeah. Right. So CAD yen is going in as well. Okay, so that settles the yen family. So if Australia, right? So this one here is interesting, right? So Euro odd, we are bearish bias, but based on this analysis here, Australia would likely weaken. Okay, it's not 100%, but it's likely. So if Australia weaken, then Euro Australia will not be bearish. For that reason, right? So I wouldn't be focusing too much on that because it's kind of like again conflicting, right? So I wouldn't want to put too much emphasis on it. Okay, so I'll put that to skip. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. So pound, Australia, this pair here, our analysis is bullish, which means that Australia is going to be weak. That's good, right? It aligns with that. Pound is bullish. Okay, so in this case, euro pound here give me the view that euro is going to be weaker than pound, which means pound likely be strengthening a little bit more than that. So I might put this in, okay, to monitor for next week. Pound Australia. Okay, Aussie Kiwi is down. Okay, which means that Australia CAD. No, I'm not likely gonna look at that. Okay, Swiss franc here, I'll likely look at Australia franc. Yep. Good, right? So that fills up my pair to watch. Cool, right? So, done. Okay, these are the 6 pairs I'm going to monitor for the week to come, right? And then usually what I'll do is I'll just go over to TradingView. Okay, I have my watch list over here. That's this here called key list. Okay, I'm going to remove all this. This was last week, right? And then I'm going to key in this week one, which is dollar Canadian. Okay, euro yen, Australia yen, CAD yen, pound Australia. Oops. Okay, and Aussie franc. Okay, so these are the pairs I'm going to monitor very closely for setups to take. Okay, all of those direction has been done. So I'm be looking for buy setup on the dollar CAD. I'm be looking for sell setup on the euro yen, sell setup on the Aussie yen, sell setup on the Canadian yen. Okay, whether the risk reward is worth it, I need to consider that as well, of course. Pound Australia, I'll be looking for buy. Again, it might not come down here, right? So again, if there's any form of setup that I can take to buy, I'll take it. Okay, and of course, Aussie Swiss franc looking for sell, right? Again, any setup that I can take to sell, I'll be looking for that sell trade. Good. Okay, does it mean that these are the only 6 pair or that's the best 6 pair to monitor for the week? The answer is of course no, right? Because again, this is where there are many opportunities. That's how my process of picking up and focusing on them. And of course, it can also mean that I might miss opportunity, right? So, like pound Australia over here. Okay, so we are looking for bearish. This looks really, really nice, honestly, right? Okay, so but it's not in my, it's not here. It's not in my key list, right? Does it mean that maybe on Tuesday, next week, I won't take the trade, I won't look at it? No, right? It's just that this will be my priority. Okay, but this is really looking very clean. Okay, so I might also look at it because if we're selling the pound dollar, then this aligns, right? Dollar strengthening aligns. And why I don't have this right now in my watch list here is because the euro pound suggests that euro will be weaker than pound. So if I were to sell this one here, I would rather look to sell euro dollar than pound dollar, right? So for that reason, this wasn't in my priority. Okay, but it's still in my rate tag list, right? If you look at this, it's still in my rate tag list. So definitely still monitoring it. Yeah, so that's how I do it, right? So you can see the time taken is about 1 hour 15. If there's not much of an explanation, vocalizing my thought process, that's an average of about 1 hour a week. Okay, and this is important, right? This step here is important because it's basically all the hard work I need to do for the week to come, done in a week, all right, done in an hour for the week. And what I really need to do on a day-to-day basis when the market starts and it opens next week is really to just go through, my kill list. Over here, of course, I take trade on 1 hour time frame, right? I'll go to a 1 hour time frame and just scan through on a day-to-day basis. If there's any setup, a valid trade that I can take with the direction that I've done my homework with. Okay, and on the average, that takes about maybe like 15, 20 minutes a day, and that's it. Okay, so yeah, so that's all from me. Hope this video here showing you behind the scenes of really how I prepare my weekly routine, my weekly watch list, the time needed, okay, the thought process that I put in, and give you a glimpse, right, of what I do on a week-to-week basis, especially on a weekend. Okay, so hope that's giving you some insights. It helps to give you some perspective into how I prepare, how you can prepare yourself as well. Okay, again, it's not really meant for a question Q&A session and things like that. Yeah, so that's all from me. Again, if there's any other things that I'd like to talk about, we'll do another Facebook Live and things like that to share with you more. Right, so that's all from me today. Hope you guys have a great trading week. Tomorrow onwards, right? Next week. Again, see you guys, right? And always remember to manage your risk, right? We always emphasize that. Okay, have a good week ahead, and see you guys.